Typically, the events that we host here for International Women's Day are inspired by if you can't see it, you can't be it. And the role models that we tend to invite for the day help us inspire our audience to be whatever it is, an expert in a field, an influencer in your field. And we always like to have a West Cork flavour to it because we know that the talent and expertise that either is here today or the folks who we invite from here originally, it's an unbelievable talent base, and we love to showcase that and inspire all of us in that arena. And so the people that we've invited in the past have been experts and influencers in the world of corporate world, the world of health and media. And of course, last year we would have had an Olympian join us. Come on in, there's loads of room over here, guys. Welcome. In the past, we've had Dean Forbes, Lorraine Sappin, Ronnie McCarthy, Holly Cairns, Emily Hegarty, Anne O'Leary, Fiona O'Donnell, Priscilla Lynch, all past speakers of International Women's Day, or speaking to us on the subject of health and wellbeing. This year, our keynote speaker comes from the world of STEM and academia. We know gender balance in the world of STEM is lopsided, and so I'm particularly pleased to be introducing you to a wonderful role model who can inspire us with her knowledge and wisdom. I suspect many of you guys know her already because I see a strong Connemore machine contingent in the room, and that's fantastic. So for those of you who don't know Anne Marie and her bio, Professor Anne Marie Minihane is a nutritional biochemist by training. She is a professor of Nutrigenetics and head of nutrition and preventive medicine in the Norwich Medical School, University of East Anglia, and also director of the Norwich Institute of Healthy Aging. And her main research interests include brain health, intervention strategies, mainly nutrition, with a recent interest in HRT. Of course, we're all delighted to be able to talk openly about those topics. And intervention strategies that support brain health into old age, another highly relevant topic. And in addition to all that, Anne Marie teaches the Medical and Bioscience students in UEA. So as I mentioned, Anne Marie is a local girl, a native of West Cork, growing up in Connemore, going to school in Kilcoe, then Mercy Heights, like many of us here in the room, and then on to UCC, and is a regular visitor back home. She also happens to be Rose's sister here, who was part of the Nutgate team, so that might be how it's secured, this particular keynote speaker. So recently, Anne Marie was breaking headline news across BBC and The Guardian, and you can see some of that there, of course, Daily Express, with her groundbreaking research on a potential relationship between HRT and dementia. Of course, we're all eagerly awaiting to hear from her on that particular topic.
Good morning, everyone. Grania, thank you for that lovely introduction. I hope I can bring some knowledge and wisdom to the occasion, and absolutely honoured to be asked to give this this keynote lecture for International Women's Day 2023. And hello to everyone. I can recognise some familiar faces on Zoom. I can't quite see who's in the room, but there may be some familiar faces in the room as well. So I'll try and cover today this rather large topic over the next 40 or 45 minutes or so, which is a bit of an ask, to be honest, but we'll give it a go. And if I ever wonder the importance of staying healthy, I actually just need to look out my office window here. I'm in the medical school at UEA, and we're directly across from the University Hospital, the Norwich and Norfolk University Hospital. And it's a quiet morning this morning. There's only 9 ambulances queuing outside. But on a bad day, there's about 25 queuing outside. And it kind of just reminds me the importance of all doing what we can to stay as healthy for as long as we can, which is kind of the topic of the lecture this morning. So first of all, I loved what people wrote in the chat box about health. You know, it kind of ranges from feeling good about it to being anxious to being uncertain, under prioritized, and kind of everything in between. And that kind of rhetoric changes for all of us over the course of the day or the year or as the years go by. But it's kind of a big part of all of our lives. And just to kind of just think about what official definitions of health are. And this was a definition, which was a very forward-thinking definition, actually, which was defined by the WHO, the World Health Organization, in 1948. Defining health as a state of complete physical and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmary. And then in 1984, they actually upgraded that definition. The extent to which an individual or group is able to realize aspirations and satisfy needs and to change or cope with our ever-changing environment. And I think that's kind of a much more inclusive definition of health. And it's kind of something that we all kind of want to aspire to. Now, when we think about the assets in our lives, and assets are kind of valuable or useful people or things, we always think about material assets. So we think maybe about our homes or our cars, or we might have, if we're very lucky, we might have an art collection, or we might have jewelry, or, you know, those are kind of the material assets. And then we think about the kind of skills assets we have in our lives. So we might, you know, have a certain level of education, a certain level of knowledge. We might be in a job we enjoy, which we consider an asset. And then, of course, we all have wonderful people in our lives, be they our work colleagues or our friends or our families or our neighbours. And of course, that's a huge asset for all of us. But an asset we often forget about is our health. And I would say that health is almost our most important asset. And an asset we often don't pay enough attention to, if I'm honest. And this is one of my favorite people. Some of you may recognize him. It's Warren Buffett. He's 92. He's the fifth wealthiest man in the world. He's a businessman, a financier, and also very much a philanthropist. And he makes this really good point, which is called one body, one mind. And it goes like this. He uses an analogy. If we were given one car at the age of 18 and we were told that that car had to last us a lifetime, how would we treat that car? And I suppose we would service it, we would polish it, we would wash it. If there was the slightest thing wrong with it, we'd take it down to John Leary or whatever the garage is close to you and see if we could get it fixed. And we would try and put some good oil and petrol into it, I think. You know, we wouldn't be putting cruddy old oil or petrol into that car if it had to last us a lifetime. Our body actually is that car. We're given one body, one mind, which has to last us a lifetime. And, you know, for some of us, we probably ought to be taking care of it a little better. And I like the analogy of kind of petrol and oil, because, of course, our version of petrol and oil in our bodies is what we consume, you know, our food and drink. And oftentimes we kind of skimp on that quite important thing, which has a huge impact on our health and well-being. And actually, this is just statistics from Ireland and the UK, which kind of shows that, I mean, some people who are in food poverty, and food poverty, there's actually almost 20% of the population of the UK now are in food poverty, which means that you don't have a secure supply of nutritious food over the course of the week. But for most of us, we have some choices over our disposable income and what we spend on. But actually in Ireland and the UK, we spend a very low proportion of our budget, actually only 8% on food. And that is one of the lowest in Europe. So Ireland is here in the same rank as the UK, where we spend only 8% of our total household budgets on food. And an argument I often get when people are considering eating healthily is that eating healthily is more expensive. And it certainly can be a bit more expensive. But I guess my point is it depends on how we prioritize spending our money. And when you compare Ireland and the UK to other countries in Europe, comparable countries such as France and Italy, Slovenia and Bulgaria, you can see those countries choose and prioritize food much more, and as a nation decide to spend much more money on food. Likewise, in Ireland, we tend to like our holidays, and I was actually really surprised at this statistic. The average Irish person spends €2,800 on their summer holiday, which seems excessively high to me. It seems very high indeed. But that average is about, I worked it out, about €55 a week. And again, you know, if people are asked to spend maybe a little bit extra to have slightly healthier food, then that €55 a week would go a long way if you prioritize it maybe a little bit more towards your grocery shopping or other things to promote your health rather than your summer holiday. And this is just to harbour the point home again. As an asset in the UK, we spend a lot of money on cars, and it seems over a lifetime. We spend, if you drive for 60 years, you spend £438,000 on motoring and cars. Now, I think we all need cars, but probably a lot of us don't need such expensive cars. And again, for many, I'm just making the point that, perhaps we as a nation ought to be spending a little bit more of our disposable income on contributing to our health rather than on other elements of our lives. So I suppose my first take-home message, and I've got T1 here on the bottom of the screen, is health is an asset if we're fortunate enough to have good health, and it's something that we kind of need to prioritize, think about, and put some of our resources towards. Now, the next thing to talk about is life expectancy and healthy life expectancy. I'm always blown away that if you take statistics from 1900 in Ireland, the average life expectancy was 48 years at birth. So people on average lived 48 years, only if you go back 1900, which isn't that long ago. And the reason for the fact that life expectancy was so low was because infant mortality was quite high. So infant mortality now is about 3 per 1,000 births. So infant mortality is defined as dying in the first year of life. And actually, our infant mortality rates in Ireland now are really low. They're only 3 per 1,000. Back in 1900, they were 150 per 1,000. So another contributor to lower life expectancy in 1900 was the fact that lots of people died from infectious diseases. We didn't really have effective vaccines or antibiotics. So lots of people died from things like scarlet fever, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, typhus, TB, all those kinds of conditions which are now under control. And the other reason was that our ability to kind of diagnose and treat disease was relatively poor compared to what it is today. So these days in Ireland, life expectancy at birth, if you're born this year and nothing else changes throughout your lifetime, life expectancy, you would expect to live 82.6 years, and it's slightly higher in females than it is in males. Now, for most people, towards the end of our lives, we can expect to suffer on average 15 to 20 years of ill health with a clinical diagnosis of disease. What we don't want to do, and what healthcare systems are very good at doing, is increasing life expectancy without an associated increase in healthy life expectancy. So that what that means actually is we're living longer, but we're also suffering from ill health for longer, which isn't ideal for us as individuals, and it's certainly not ideal for health and social care provision. So what we need to be moving towards is this model where we all want to live longer, but our ill health is compressed into the latter parts of our lives. And adopting healthy behaviours throughout life is the most efficient way of doing that. And it's never too early or it's never too late to start, which is the good news. And as Bronnie said, I lead Norwich Institute of Healthy Aging, and we're very focused on this phenomena of not just adding years to life, but adding life to years. And by looking at how all our lifestyle behaviours, which are presented on this screen, contribute to more healthy life expectancy. And the two health behaviours which I'll focus on today, none are more important than the others, but these are the ones that I have some expertise in, is nutrition and HRT. And HRT is a new area for me, but one I think I'll be investigating for a while yet. And this is just a bit of data. I won't show many papers, but this is just one compelling bit of data, I think, from Harvard School of Public Health, where they took people who were healthy And they gave everybody a lifestyle score, depending on your smoking status, whether you're physically active, whether you're not, you were a moderate alcohol consumer, the type of diet you ate, and whether you had a healthy BMI. And then, so 123,000 people took part, and they followed these participants up for 34 years. And what they found was people who scored 5 versus 0 on this lifestyle score could expect to live 14 years longer from the age of 50 if you were female, and 12 years longer if you were male, which I think is a pretty compelling demonstration of the influence of our lifestyle behaviors on our health. Now, the good news is that we don't need to strive for the perfect lifestyle or being hugely physically active. Perfection is always the enemy of the adequate or the good. And we can often be kind of stunted into inaction by the strive for perfection. But I think the message very much when it comes to lifestyle behaviors is some is better than none and more is better than less. And even actually small changes to what we do can have a large impact on our health right now, but also on our long-term health trajectory. So yeah, no need to scream. It's manageable. So before I go any further, the theme of International Women's Day 2023 is equity. And I will spend one slide talking about the fact that women are somewhat behind the curve when it comes to the type of healthcare that we are provided with. Now, I'm going to mention this not from the point of view it's all doom and gloom, but from the point of view that it's really exciting times, because this is actually really well recognized now. It's well recognized that the male white person is the default in medicine, and that has to change going forward. But I'm just going to give you a few thoughts as to where the current status quo and how that's very much changing. When it comes to women's health is often associated with social stigma. There's this awful thing about, talking about, and it's very, things like menopause and menstrual pain and female conditions. They're things that we all suffer from, but somehow they're not represented at all in the social media and popular culture. But actually, we were talking about this at home this morning, and this is very much changing. So we had 2 demonstrations last week. We're big fans of Happy Valley in our house. And we also went to see Zoe Lyons, the comedian, this week in the Playhouse in Norwich. And both of those occasions really featured menopause. There was a good mention of menopause in both forms of entertainment. So actually the social stigma, thankfully, associated with female conditions, this thing of, suddenly a Tampax flies out of your bag and you're absolutely mortified. Hopefully the stigma associated with that kind of thing is changing. The next thing to say is that female biology is generally less well understood. So if I go on to the next slide and present these organs to you here, you'll probably all be able to recognize this is the heart, this is our brains, and these are as a pair of kidneys. But if I click onto this one here, this is the female reproductive system. And probably less of us will be able to name the ovaries or the fallopian tube or the uterus. And these kind of basic bits of female biology are just not as well understood as different bits of biology. Research traditionally has been conducted in men. Now, this again is very much changing, thankfully. I mean, there are statistics like 70% of people who suffer from chronic pain, and chronic pain is pain that persists for longer than 3 months. 70% of people who suffer from chronic pain are female, but 80% of research on pain therapy is done either in human males or male rodents. Now that is very much changing. Cardiovascular disease or having a heart attack, the development of cardiovascular disease is very different in females rather than males are quite different, and the effective treatments for cardiovascular disease are quite different in males and females. But often a lot of these diagnostic and pharmacological research has been conducted almost exclusively in male participants, which means that it's not as fit for purpose for females. So, but as I say, the situation is very much changing. Exclusively female conditions are less well researched. So things like endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovary, the menopause, which we'll come on to in a second, everything to do with the menstrual cycle. These conditions are traditionally less well researched than other conditions. And the last thing to mention is, and I don't know if any of us have experienced this, females are often seem to be taken less seriously in certain areas of healthcare. And there's often this worry that females or women are considered less accurate narrators and observers of their own health. And there's much more likely, I think, and I think this is a fair criticism, that if females present to their doctor and the clinician can't quite figure out the symptoms they're describing, that they might be worried that the patient might be slightly hypochondriac, or they might be anxious or depressed, or have some kind of a personality disorder, or even worse, God forbid, that person could be said to be hysterical. This old traditional idea of hysteria. And I think there is still somewhat of a culture of women being treated differently by healthcare systems compared to males. But the good news about all of this is it is very much changing, and it is very rapidly changing. And I'm kind of seeing it in my sphere in research. So the menopause, what do we know about the menopause? Well, menopause is part of our normal life course in women. We're said to be menopausal when we haven't had a period, when we haven't had an amenorrhea for at least 1 year. That's the definition of being postmenopausal. Before that, there's a period called the menopausal transition, where we go from being premenopausal to postmenopausal. That lasts on average for about 4 years, when we suffer these often awful menopausal symptoms like hot flushes and night sweats and anxiety and brain fog and lack of concentration and lack of attention. 80% of women suffer some kind of menopausal symptoms. 20% suffer really severe menopausal symptoms. And 10% of women in the UK have to leave the workforce due to their menopausal symptoms. So they are very serious for some. Menopausal symptoms last for, on average, 7 years, can go on for much longer in some women. What happens when we're going through the menopause is the levels of two particular hormones called estrogen and progesterone start to decline. Women also produce what we would consider to be a traditionally male hormone called testosterone, but at much lower levels. So this is what estrogen and progesterone levels look throughout life. So these are the levels at birth on the left-hand side. Then they fluctuate quite a lot during puberty. And then during our fertile years, both estrogen and progesterone are elevated. As we go through the perimenopause, the production of estrogen and progesterone gets really erratic for a period of time. And it's this erratic hormone production which causes these really quite consequential menopausal symptoms. And then as we transition to postmenopausal, the levels of estrogen and progesterone settle down, but at a much lower level than they were during our fertile years. What is HRT? So if you were to be prescribed HRT, generally it's a combination of estrogen and progesterone. The only women that are prescribed estrogen only are women who've had a hysterectomy. If you've got a fully functional womb or uterus, then you will also be prescribed progesterone. And the reason for that is if you're not prescribed progesterone, the lining of the womb builds up, which can increase your risk of cancer of the womb. So if you've got a functional uterus and you're prescribed HRT, it will be a combination of estrogen and progesterone. Testosterone isn't really available. It can be prescribed privately for low libido and also brain fog and very low energy levels, but it's not usually a standard part of HRT. If you take HRT, you can either take it orally, you can take it transdermally, either a skin patch, a gel, or a spray, or you can also take it vaginally. And there are different forms of these estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, which can either be natural or synthetic, which I can go into a little bit more in the questions if need be. Now, there's a huge scientific literature about the safety of taking HRT. There was a study which was conducted between 1993 and 1998 in the US called the Women's Health Initiative, a huge study involving about 17,000 women. It was stopped prematurely after 5 years because HRT was increasing the risk of breast cancer in these women. Now, that caused a huge level of anxiety in the field. But the bottom line now is if you take HRT, there is very, very little risk, long-term risk associated with it. There is, if you take progesterone for longer than 5 years, it might slightly increase your risk of breast cancer, but the increased risk is no greater than having a couple of glasses of wine a night or being overweight. If you take estrogen and you're a person who's at increased likelihood of blood clotting, so for example, if you've had a stroke in the past, or you've had other reasons which put you at increased risk of a blood clot, then you're often prescribed the transdermal form because it's only the oral estrogen which is associated with an increased risk of blood clot. And again, the increased risk of blood clot is very low. So the bottom line is that HRT is a safe intervention for most of us. Now, there are certain individuals where HRT isn't recommended, and this is a list here. So if you have recent breast cancer, it's not, HRT is likely not to be recommended. If you have other estrogen-dependent cancers, such as endometrial cancer or ovarian cancer, if you're at increased risk, if you've had a blood clot, like deep vein thrombosis or a blood clot in your lung, you won't be prescribed HRT. Untreated endometrial hyperplasia, where the lining of your lung or the lining of your uterus is really growing abnormally, won't be prescribed HRT. And you can see here there are other conditions which make a woman unsuitable for HRT. There's also another list of conditions where HRT is prescribed with caution. So if you're diabetic, if you're at an increased risk of a blood clot, if you tend to suffer from migraines, or if you have a family history of breast cancer, then the clinician may consider HRT, but it will be based on your overall health profile. HRT is absolutely effective at mitigating things like hot flushes and night sweats and the anxiety associated with the menopause. It's extremely effective indeed. It's also really good for your bones, particularly if initiated early. So a really important message for HRT is you can start taking HRT when you're in perimenopause, so when you're transitioning, you don't have to wait till you're postmenopausal. And HRT is most effective in the first 10 years after you become postmenopausal. So if the average age is 51, HRT is likely to be most effective in the perimenopause or up to the age of about 60. For bone health, that's certainly the case. So taking HRT can really help reduce your future risk of fractures and increase your bone mineral density. The brain is full of estrogen receptors. So if you look at areas of the brain important for cognition, things like the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, the amygdala. These are all areas of the brain that are important for thinking, for memory, for executive function, which allows us to multitask and process information. These areas of the brain are full of estrogen receptors. So it kind of makes sense that when we're transitioning through the menopause, most of us suffer from this condition, which I think a lot of us will identify with, called brain fog, where we think our concentration is affected. Suddenly we're worried about our memory, our verbal fluency, this phenomena that we're suddenly lost for words, and also things like sleep, mood, depression, and anxiety. This is a very sort of common set of symptoms for us women as we transition through the menopause. Also, there's a thought that the sort of loss of cognition as we transition through the menopause could contribute to the fact, which I can come back to later in the Q&A if we want to, the fact that 2/3 of dementia patients are women and 1/3 are men. So it's thought that kind of the effects of menopause on our neurocognitive function could really affect our long-term cognitive trajectory. That's why it's really important that we live a healthy life during the menopausal transition. What is the evidence that HRT can reduce the risk of dementia? And this is the paper that we got a lot of attention from a few weeks ago. The evidence is mixed, I have to say. The early observational evidence suggests that HRT was certainly associated with a reduced risk of dementia. Then the field started to do lots of trials where women were put on HRT quite late, over the age of 60, and those trials found no benefit at all. We did a piece of research which we published a few weeks ago now, or earlier this year, which was a study we did in the European Prevention of Alzheimer's Disease cohort, where we took 1,178 women. It was an observational study rather than a trial. And we looked at the association between HRT use and overall cognition and memory, and also volumes in particular areas of the brain in these women, according to whether they used HRT or not. And what we found was that in women who were ApoE4, which is women who have a higher, above average risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, women who were ApoE4, taking HRT was associated with larger brain volumes and improved memory and improved global cognition, particularly if HRT was initiated early. So that's a really important message. So particularly if HRT was initiated early, and it seemed to be only obvious in women who had a family history of dementia based on being ApoE4 carriers. So yeah, we actually were on the front page of The Guardian, and as somebody pointed out to us, it was light relief because we pushed Meghan and Harry off the front page of the newspapers for a couple of days, which had to be a good thing. So I'll move on now for the last 10 minutes or so to diet, because that is really an area I've been working on forever and a day, and particularly, and just spend a little bit of time talking about the importance of diet for brain health. And I will focus on a Mediterranean-style diet and specifically on whole grains and the importance of whole grains for health. So I'll let you read this for yourself, but this is what a good Mediterranean diet looks like. So it's got healthy fats, rich in fruits and vegetables, low in meat, rich in fish, high in legumes, which is peas, beans, and lentils, rich in nuts, quite a high consumption of this kind of healthy tomato, onion, garlic, and olive oil sauce, red wine in moderation, low intake of confectionery and sugary drinks, rich in whole grains, and people should stay quite hydrated. This kind of dietary pattern really supports brain health. And we've done a number of studies researching this. It's equivalent to about 5 years of biological aging. It can reduce your lifetime risk of dementia by about 25% if you follow this kind of plant-rich Mediterranean-style diet. But the other important message is even doing one of these things that you don't currently do can have a benefit for brain health. So you don't have to have the perfect diet. Even doing one of these things that you don't do already can reduce your lifetime risk of dementia by 5 to 10%. There are particular fruits and vegetables which are particularly beneficial for brain health. They are green leafy vegetables, things like cabbage, kale and spinach, broccoli, those kinds of things are particularly good for brain health. Berries, really good for brain health, and whole grains. Now, there's a lot of confusion around whole grains. What is a whole grain? This is what grains look like. Things like rice, wheat, corn, barley. Three particular components to a whole grain. The endosperm, the bran, and the germ. If you eat a whole grain, you eat the grain in its native form. So things like whole grain wheat, whole grain oats, barley, quinoa, oatmeal, that kind of thing. You consume grain in its natural form. White bread, white pasta, all of those kind of white carbohydrates have had the bran and the germ removed. So you're just eating the starchy middle, which is not good for gut health, and it's not good for glucose control in your bloodstream. So whole grains are particularly rich for fiber, and if there's one thing that we could all do, one thing to improve our health, it's to increase our fiber intake. And these are good examples of fiber-rich foods. So I'm just speeding up a bit. I'm kind of aware of the time and that I'm running out of time. So these are fiber-rich foods in the diet, and we're not getting enough of them. Only 7% of the UK population, I'm sure it's the same in Ireland, meet the fiber recommendation, which is 30 grams per day. How do you know if your breakfast cereal is a high-quality breakfast cereal rich in fiber? A really simple thing to do is to divide the carbohydrate by the fiber, and if it's less than 10, then it's a good quality breakfast cereal. So this is just a photo of one from our cupboard. The carbohydrate content of a bowl of fruit and fiber is 28. The fiber content is 3.6. That gives a ratio of 8. So that's a good quality breakfast cereal. If you want a good quality bread, the carbohydrate to fiber ratio should be less than 6. Why is fiber important? Well, fiber is incredibly important for gut health, and gut health is incredibly important for brain health. And I just wrote down a few quotes that just kind of anecdotally show the importance of gut health for brain health. The gut and the brain are integrally connected by a nervous system and by a whole range of components produced by the gut microbiota, which need fiber to stay healthy. And these are just some anecdotal quotes that we all use in our daily life, which shows the association between gut and brain health. If we're nervous, we say butterflies in my stomach, or we feel queasy if we're nervous. If we're disappointed, kicked in the stomach, feeling gutted, we've all felt gutted in our lives. And if we kind of know something to instinctually be right, we say things like gut instinct and gut feeling. So just kind of some examples that the gut, to keep our brain healthy, we really need to keep our gut healthy, and fiber is really important. Phytoestrogens, I can go into these a little bit more. Phytoestrogens are estrogens which are found in plants, particularly things like soya or flax seeds or sesame seeds, which are weaker estrogens, but they're natural estrogens. And actually have been shown to be very helpful with menopausal symptoms. There's not much known actually about their effects on cognition, but they're certainly very beneficial for menopausal symptoms. The last thing to say is, this is very complicated and I apologize. A lot of what we do, or our behavior, our eating behavior, is influenced by us as individuals, either our age, our gender, our sex, our motivation, our alcohol use, our income, our taste preferences. So they're down to individual attributes. But lots of the things that we do are affected by our social cultural norms, the communities in which we exist, agricultural industry and market, government policy and global policy. So this is just to show that our behavior is influenced by so many different things. But there's just on my last slide, I'd like to say one thing, that actually our workplace, I think, offers us all a real opportunity to live better. And we've started to set some of these up at the university that I work at UEA. And just that we could, as individuals and workplaces, do much better in getting together and have regular gatherings, and have sort of health groups or menopausal groups or workplace wellbeing cafes or workplace wellbeing groups. And if any of you have ever been part of Weight Watchers or Slimming World, or been part of fellowships like AA or NA or any of those, you will know the power of the fellowship and shared experience and stories and supporting each other. And I think as workplaces, we need to do much better to create the space and time where we can all get together and just openly discuss our health and our well-being and just help each other to kind of do things better and going forward. So again, I'm happy to discuss that if we have a little bit of time in Q&A. So just to say, health is our greatest asset. Our lifestyle behaviors really matter, but every little helps. Perfection is not needed. Menopause is a physiologically challenging time for sure, but actually what we do, our lifestyle behaviors, what we eat, how much we exercise, how much we sleep during this menopausal transition can make a huge difference in our well-being. Plant-rich diets, particularly whole grains, I had to name one thing, and other things like berries, green leafy vegetables and oily fish are really important for brain health. And again, just for us all to think the power of the collective and just think about in our life if we have the capacity to set up health or menopausal or well-being groups as part of our book clubs, as part of our workplaces, as part of our circle of friends. Because knowledge is power for sure, and shared experience is power. These are just further sources of information. Zoe Nutrition app is something I listen to all the time, a really good source of nutrition information. Harvard Nutrition Source, another really good source of nutrition information. And the Irish Menopause Society and the British Menopause Society, another fantastic resources. And I would just like to finish, as it's International Women's Day and it's the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, as we all know, on the 10th of April this year. I think one of the most influential people in my lifetime has been Mo Mowlam, Secretary of State for Northern Ireland from, I believe, 1997 to 1999, and was instrumental in bringing Northern Ireland to the state it's in at the moment. And I think she was a marvellous woman. So I will finish at that, and I am more than happy to try and answer your questions.
Hi, Marie. How are you?
I'm fine. Hi, Rose.
Thank you. Very informative, and the questions are already coming through. I have a question here from one person online, and she's asking, is HRT still recommended even if menopausal symptoms aren't too bad? Is it worth it for bone health? And I think this person may have osteopenia.
Yeah, I mean, I think all these decisions you kind of make in full consultation with your clinician. But certainly the evidence for HRT and bone health is very strong, particularly if HRT is initiated early. And I always say early as kind of when you're transitioning through the menopause or the first 10 years after the menopause. So yes, certainly worth having a conversation with your GP.
Yes, my question is, I think people are still finding resistance from their GP to recommend it when they go looking for it.
Yeah.
What would be an approach, or how should they go about it?
I think it's changing fast. There is kind of a historical resistance among some clinicians and GPs to consider HRT, just because of this very, very historical concern about risk. I guess it's just to be persistent, really. And you know, if you really think you want HRT and it's for you and your GP isn't so keen, perhaps think about changing your GP. I hope there's no GPs in the room.
There is a menopause clinic in Bantry. I don't know if everybody knows that.
Yeah.
So that you can go to. So it's Dr. Cullen, the Marina Medical Centre. They have a menopause clinic. So you can always go there for a consultation and then go back to your GP. Just as a
yeah. That's really helpful.
Any other questions? Hi,
Anne Marie, it's lovely listening to you this morning. Can I just ask about your latest study? Was it the pharmacological effect of HRT, or was it the lifestyle changes because they felt better with the HRT that decreased the risk of dementia?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think because it was an association study, we couldn't tease that out. I mean, actually, the analysis was corrected for things like people's diet and whether people exercised or not, or whether people were smokers or their alcohol consumption. So, you know, we should have corrected out for that. And we're looking at the effects of HRT rather than any other lifestyle. But you're absolutely right. You know, when we feel at our worst, it's often at the time when our lifestyle is at its worst as well. We're kind of less encouraged to eat healthily or to exercise when we're actually feeling quite poorly physically. So I think you're absolutely right. There's probably a direct effect of HRT, but there's probably an indirect effect that we have more sort of capability, opportunity, and motivation to pay attention to our lifestyle and our behavior when we're feeling better.
Okay, I guess I have a big question. Omega-3 fatty acids are really important in brain health, and I think they come primarily from fish oils. What would a vegetarian or a vegan do? How would they be able to get that into their diet?
Yeah, I mean that's actually really something I'm interested in, and we're actually doing a lot of research on that at the moment here in the group. So it's actually really odd because vegans and vegetarians, if you don't eat any fish, you have no dietary source of what we would call the beneficial omega-3s, EPA and DHA at all. So there's no dietary source. So you would expect EPA and DHA to be very low in vegans and vegetarians. It's lower than it is in fish eaters, but it's not alarmingly low. Because we have some capacity to make omega-3s in our body from the shorter chain omega-3. So we can make EPA and DHA, but our ability to make it is quite limited. So I think vegans and vegetarians probably would benefit from a supplement. And you can get non-fish oil supplements. So you can get EPA, DHA supplements which are made from microalgae. They tend to be a bit on the expensive side, I have to say, but I think they're probably worth taking, particularly as you're transitioning through the menopause if you're vegan or vegetarian.
Okay, question coming in here. The person is asking, when deciding to embark on HRT, how important is it to introduce testosterone into the overall mix?
Yeah, the testosterone is very controversial. It's very controversial in the UK, and it's not licensed to be provided by the NHS. So you can get it through private clinic in the UK, but not through the NHS. And I think it's the same in Ireland. You can't get testosterone through HSE. You have to go for private consultation. And I think the reason for that is because there's not enough evidence to say it's beneficial. It doesn't mean in the future that it won't be shown to be beneficial for women, but I think the evidence isn't there yet. But there is quite interesting research coming through to show that it helps with brain fog, it helps with energy levels, and particularly it helps with libido, with low libido. So I think if any of those things really ring a bell with you, it might be worth having a conversation with a private clinician, but I don't think you'll be able to get testosterone through the HSE.
Okay, and another question. The 65-35% dementia imbalance in women is very glaring. Is there anything other than the reduction in estrogen levels that has caused this to be the case? I mean, is it to do with women being in the home more, anything like that, outside interactions, or is there any other variable?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. It is quite a stark statistic, isn't it? The fact that 2/3 of dementia patients are women. I mean, part of the reason for that's a very positive one. We live longer, and dementia is very age related. So, you know, the fact that we live on average 4 years longer is one of the main reasons why there's higher incidence in women. But even if you correct for age standardized rates, they're still significantly higher in women. One of the reasons I think is that the loss of estrogen has quite a dramatic effect on long-term cognitive health. And that's why it's really important for us women to really take care, particularly through the menopausal transition. Also, women have much stronger immune systems. That's why women suffer from more autoimmune diseases. So there's more women with fibromyalgia, there's more women with IBS. Of course, a major contributor to brain aging is something called neuroinflammation. So even though we might have a stronger immune system, which is protective in certain ways, it might also come back to bite us and cause higher neuroinflammation, which contributes to a slightly higher risk of having cognitive decline later in life. So it's probably due to a multitude of reasons, which are probably not as well understood as we would like at this stage.
Okay. I have a question here from another online participant. They're saying, this person is a cancer survivor 30 years ago, and they're in their 30s. They were in their 30s when they were diagnosed, so I would imagine they're in their mid to late 40s now. Can they ever avail of HRT?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, the advice at the moment is no, to be honest. I mean, I'd probably need to know more about I'm not a cancer specialist by any shape. So, I mean, it's a discussion certainly with your clinician. The default answer is no, but I think it will depend on your overall health profile and what your overall health profile looks like. Phytoestrogens would certainly be probably a good idea if you're in that position. Yeah, I mean, I probably can't say more than that. It is worth having, as I say, a conversation with your clinician, but the answer is likely to be no.
Okay, and here's another question. I think this may be actually from a medical practitioner. They say, sometimes I see regularly clients is that they wait until symptoms are bad before starting HRT. It sounds like the advice coming from you and from research is that the earlier the better. Is that the case?
Absolutely. I mean, as women, I think we're awful at kind of suffering in silence and just thinking it'll go away and it's not that bad. And actually, it often is bloody bad. Pardon my language. And you know, there is a solution out there, which for most of us is a solution that will have very, very little downsides. So I think if you have menopausal symptoms, which are really affecting your quality of life and your family life, your work life, and you're feeling dreadful, don't wait. Absolutely don't wait. The earlier the better, I would agree.
Okay. Any more questions there? No, I think that's it. Thank you so much. I think
just to wrap up, Anne Marie, that was amazing. Thank you. We may have to get you back actually. We had your response, and I suppose what I'm really interested in observing over the coming years is the fact that 80% of research being conducted on the men in the past. I'm really excited to see what is going to unfold for women. And the fact that you're part of it and you can bring us the groundbreaking research is fantastic. So we'll keep you on speed dial, Anne Marie, there. So come back. I really found invaluable as well as the upbeat and motivation and inspiring words you have for us, that it's not all doom and gloom. Like, we're all going to start running over to the GP clinic now for the HRT. We don't have it already. Obviously, we'll feeds together our whole grains and parts right up the market tomorrow. So that was amazing, really thought-provoking and educational and informative. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. And thank you, Gronia, and thank you, Rose, for inviting me, and a huge thank you for Mary for just sorting out the IT so seamlessly. Thank you, Mary, much appreciated. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.